The dress still fit. Barely. She'd had to hold her breath while Owen worked the zipper up, his fingers steady, unhurried. And when it finally caught, he laughed quietly and told her she looked incredible, then pressed his lips to the curve of her shoulder. Lindsey held on to that moment for the rest of the night. The warmth of his mouth on bare skin, the particular softness in his voice when he said that word, incredible, like he meant something more than her dress. It was New Year's Eve, 29 weeks along, and they were at Marcus and Julie's place in the Highlands, one of those old Kentucky houses with a wraparound porch and original windows someone had covered in plastic sheeting and decided to stop thinking about. The living room smelled of mulled wine and too many bodies pressed into too small a space, and underneath it all, the damp, faintly sour presence of someone's dog, who absolutely should not have been inside. A Fleetwood Mac playlist hummed from the speakers at a volume that made every conversation lean in close, so that the whole party moved like a room full of people sharing secrets. Lindsey had stationed herself near the kitchen island with a sparkling water she didn't particularly want, one hand resting on the swell of her stomach the way it always did now. Not a gesture, just gravity, her body making decisions before her mind did. Owen was across the room by the fireplace, surrounded, animated, holding court with that particular glow he got at parties. The version of himself that still surprised her sometimes. The one that made her remember, with a small and genuine jolt, exactly why she'd fallen for him in the first place. Then Amber was simply beside her. That was always how it was with Amber. She didn't cross a room so much as materialize in it, appearing at Owen's elbow close enough that the sleeve of her sweater nearly grazed his arm. She offered him a drink he hadn't asked for. He took it without quite looking at who was offering, as if some part of him already knew. Lindsey wasn't paying attention. Not really. Amber was her coworker. They'd been friendly for 2 years. Thursday lunches at the Thai place on Bardstown Road, a Target care kit with ginger chews and a card that said she was going to be the best mother. Lindsey still kept the card in her desk drawer, tucked under a box of paperclips, which maybe said something she hadn't been ready to examine. What she could have noticed if she'd been looking for different things. Amber's hand on Owen's arm, twice, within 20 minutes. Owen tilting forward when Amber spoke, just slightly, just a fraction too much for a colleague at a party. And then the moment Amber found Lindsey's eyes across the room and smiled. Warm, radiant, a smile so clean and unbothered, it was almost anatomically impossible for someone with something to hide. At midnight, Owen materialized at her side. He slid his arm around her waist, and she leaned into him the way she always did, her cheek finding the familiar hollow below his shoulder like something returning to its place. Someone popped a champagne bottle against the ceiling, graceless, joyful, foam everywhere. He kissed her, long enough to feel real. Across the room, Amber watched them from the couch, her flute raised to her lips, her expression giving away absolutely nothing. Owen's phone buzzed in his pocket, against her hip. He pulled back, glanced at the screen and turned it face down in one practiced motion. "Work," he said. "It's midnight," Lindsey said. He shrugged. "I know." He pulled her closer with his other arm as if that resolved it, and she let herself be pulled, because she was 29 weeks pregnant and warm and in love and still inside a room full of people she trusted, not yet knowing what she was standing on the edge of. Across the room, Amber refilled her champagne. The plastic sheeting over the window lifted and resettled on a draft. The room kept laughing. The music kept playing. Owen's phone buzzed a second time. He didn't check it. A small movement passed through his jaw, a tightening there and gone before it had a name. Lindsey felt it against her cheek. She didn't say anything. 11 days into the new year. Their phones lived in the same corner of the kitchen counter. Same model, same black case, side by side like a habit neither of them had thought to break. Lindsey had been meaning to get a different case for months. She kept forgetting. She grabbed the wrong one on her way to the bathroom, didn't check the screen until she was already sitting on the edge of the tub. The message was open. Last night was Amber's name at the top. 4 words. She read them once, then again, her mind doing what minds do, reaching first for the innocent version, the work event, the misread context, the reasonable explanation, and then the innocent version simply collapsed and there was nothing underneath it, and the bathroom was so quiet she could hear the blood moving in her ears. Lindsey set the phone face down on the edge of the tub. The faucet dripped. Owen had been meaning to fix it since September. The phone made a small plastic sound against the porcelain. The faucet answered it. Drip, tick, drip. She picked the phone back up, went to the thread. There were more messages, many more. She'd read 3 lines when Owen walked in without knocking. He saw the phone. Something moved across his face. A flash, there, and gone. "That's mine," he said. "I know." She stood. "How long?" "Linz." "How long, Owen?" He reached for the phone. She held it back. He closed his hand around her wrist. Not hard, but closed. And she pulled free with a sharp twist and stepped back, and the bathroom, which had always felt perfectly sized, suddenly had no room in it at all. "Don't," she said. He raised both hands. The reasonable pose. She'd seen it before, when she'd asked about the savings transfer in October, when she'd questioned the late nights in November. Hands up, chin slightly down, the practiced patience of a man waiting for a woman to finish being upset. "It's not what it looks like," he said. "It looks like your girlfriend is texting you the morning after. She's not my..." He stopped. Something recalibrated behind his eyes. It was one time. It was a mistake. It was not one time. It had been going on for 14 months. Dinners at Proof on Main, 2 hotel stays during work trips, 100 and more text messages she would eventually read in full. One time is the first version of the story, the one men reach for when they've been caught and need a few more days to build a better one. "You're lying," Lindsey said. "I'm not lying. I'm telling you it happened once." "It's over, and I need you to calm down. Do not tell me to calm down." Her voice broke on the last word, not from weakness, but from the sheer physical effort of keeping it level this long. "I am 7 months pregnant. You were with Amber last night, the Amber who brought me ginger chews when we announced the pregnancy. That Amber." His jaw tightened. "You're making this bigger than it is. Get out of the bathroom." "Lindsey." "Out." He left. She listened to him move through the bedroom, a drawer, his keys, the front door, the car backing down the driveway. Then nothing. The particular nothing of a house that has one fewer person in it than it did a minute ago. She sat on the edge of the tub for a long time. The faucet dripped. Her hands were shaking in a way she couldn't will them to stop, so she pressed them flat against her knees and breathed slowly and looked at the grout between the floor tiles and counted the lines until her vision steadied. Then she picked up his phone, still on the floor where it had landed, and read the entire thread from the beginning. 14 months. It had been 14 months. She set the phone on the counter with both hands carefully, like it was something that could break or burn. Then she walked to the kitchen because she needed to be somewhere that wasn't that bathroom, filled a glass of water she didn't drink, and stood at the counter with her eyes on the window above the sink, seeing nothing. The baby kicked. Hard. Twice. And she pressed her palm against the side of her stomach and said nothing, because there was nothing yet to say, and the nothing felt enormous and close, like a wall she hadn't seen coming until she was already against it. Owen's handwritten sticky note on the refrigerator said, "Oil change Saturday." She peeled it off, dropped it in the trash. Owen came home that evening with flowers. Peonies, her favorites, he always remembered, and an expression of practiced devastation. He'd spent the day building his version of events, shaping it, testing its weight, and he walked through the door already performing it. "I ended it," he said. "I swear to you, today, it's done." Lindsey looked at the peonies. She looked at them for a long moment. Then she looked at him. "I want you to call her," she said, "right now, in front of me." His expression shifted. "What?" "Call Amber, right now. Put it on speaker. Tell her it's over." She crossed her arms over her stomach, the baby pressing against her ribs, restless, as if waiting alongside her. "If it's already done, it's easy. It's just a phone call. Owen set the peonies on the counter. This is easy, Lindsey said. If you'd already ended it, this would be easy. He looked at her. She looked back. The kitchen was very quiet. The faucet she'd been asking him to fix since September kept its slow, indifferent rhythm in the silence. He picked up his phone. She watched his face as he dialed. Watched 3 separate things happen in 4 seconds. The calculation, the performance layered over it, and beneath both of those, something she had never seen in him before and didn't yet have a word for. The line rang twice. He hung up. She didn't answer, he said. Try again. Lindsey. Owen. His name broke slightly in her mouth, just once, a small fault line quickly sealed. I am 30 weeks pregnant with your son. I need you to call the woman you've been sleeping with for over a year and tell her it's over. That's it, that's all I'm asking. He didn't call again. He slid the phone into his pocket and stood there, and the not calling said more than anything he could have managed out loud. You can't do it, Lindsey said. It's complicated, Linz. It's a phone call. You don't understand what... I understand completely. She pulled out a chair and sat down because her back had been aching since morning and she was not going to have this conversation on her feet. You want both. You want me to forgive you and the baby to come and everything to go back to normal. And you also want Amber. You've been acting like you could have both for 14 months, and now you're standing in this kitchen trying to figure out if you still can. He said nothing. So choose, she said. Right now, me and this baby, or her. The peonies sat on the counter between them. Pale pink, barely open, their petals still curved inward like something that hadn't yet decided whether to bloom. Owen looked at his phone. Then he looked at Lindsey. And here is what stayed with her long after that night. He didn't look guilty. He didn't look torn. For just a moment he looked relieved. The specific relief of a man who has just been handed permission to say what he'd already decided. I'm sorry, he said. 2 words, just that. She understood. You need to leave, she said. Her voice was steady. She had no idea how. Lindsey, tonight, take what you need for a few days. She pressed her palms flat on the table. And don't you dare bring her here. He went upstairs. She listened to the drawers opening, the navy duffel he took on work trips. She could track it by sound alone, that particular zipper, the one she'd heard 100 times without ever once thinking about what it meant. 12 minutes. He came back down with the bag over his shoulder, his laptop case, and the good coat. He stopped in the kitchen doorway. I'll call about the baby, he said. I want to be involved. Good night, Owen. He left. She sat at that kitchen table for a long time after his car pulled away. And the truth of how it felt was this. It was not graceful. She covered her face with her hands and cried, the ugly, airless kind with no composure left to protect, because she had loved this man. She had built something real with him, something she'd believed in completely. She was 30 weeks pregnant with his daughter, and when he'd finally been given the chance to choose clearly, with no ambiguity left between them, he had chosen someone else. That matters. It can be both devastating and survivable at once. Eventually, the crying stopped, and she sat with her hands on the table and her breathing coming back slowly, unevenly, like a tide pulling back after a storm. The overhead light was too bright. She'd been meaning to replace it with something softer for months. She reached up and turned it off. In the dark, she sat with the kitchen around her, the takeout menus on the counter, the prenatal vitamins by the sink, the 2 coffee mugs they'd bought at the Bardstown Farmers Market, both of them sitting in exactly the same spot they always had. She picked up Owen's mug, set it in the sink without looking at it. She went to bed. Sleep didn't come. His side of the mattress was cold, and she lay on her side facing the wall and thought about the expression on his face when she'd said choose. That flash of relief, present, and then gone. And understood that somewhere beneath the hope, she had known for longer than she'd been willing to admit. The faucet dripped in the bathroom. She let it. She went to work the next morning, because what else do you do? She filed 3 documents, answered 6 emails, walked a junior associate through a deposition question, completed every task correctly and without visible difficulty, the way she always had, functional under pressure, composed on the surface. She'd learned that about herself a long time ago, and she was learning it again now. Owen texted at 7:15. "I know you're upset, but you need to be realistic about the situation." She stared at the word realistic for a long time. She took a screenshot. Then she kept moving. The audacity of that word. The man who had walked out the door with his navy duffel, who, when given a clear and simple choice, had chosen telling the woman he'd left 30 weeks pregnant to be realistic. That word landed. It didn't break her. It burned away the last of her uncertainty like fog off pavement, and what was left underneath was sharp and clean and very, very clear. At noon, she went to the break room and found Amber already there. They hadn't spoken since the closed-door conversation 2 days prior, the one where Lindsey had said 14 months and watched Amber's face absorb it. 2 days of careful navigation in a building where their offices sat 30 feet apart. Amber was making tea. She turned when Lindsey walked in. "Hey." The performance slid back into place like a mask lifted off a shelf. The concerned friend version. "I heard you're going through a hard time. I just wanted you to know, don't." Lindsey put her lunch in the microwave, hit the buttons. "I'm not doing this with you in here. Lindsey, I think we should talk." "We talked." She turned. "In your office. I said everything I needed to say." Amber set her mug down. Something shifted in her expression. A subtle drop in the performance. The cooler thing underneath it briefly visible like a current beneath still water. "I know you're angry, but Owen and I..." "Stop." The word came out harder than Lindsey intended, sharp enough that Amber actually did. "You don't get to explain Owen and me to me. I am his wife. I am carrying his child. You are..." She stopped. Drew one slow breath. "You are someone who chose to do this knowing exactly what it would cost me." Amber held her gaze. He was unhappy. The microwave beeped. Lindsey didn't move. "He was unhappy," Amber said again, and this time there was something different in it. Not quite cruelty, but the particular candor of a woman who has decided to stop pretending, who has been waiting 14 months for the moment she'd finally be allowed to say the thing out loud. He was unhappy. Said like that, in the break room, on a Tuesday. Not as an apology, as an argument. As a justification she'd been rehearsing for over a year, waiting for the room where she could finally use it. "You were there," Lindsey said quietly. "In my marriage, pretending to be my friend, rubbing my back when I was sick." She paused. "While you were sleeping with my husband." Amber said nothing. The microwave beeped a second time. The fluorescent light above the sink flickered once, held. Lindsey picked up her lunch, walked to the door, stopped. "You brought me ginger chews," she said, not turning around. "From Target, when we announced the pregnancy. You wrote me a card." A pause. "I want you to think about that." She left. Back at her desk, lunch untouched, palms flat on the surface like she was steadying something that might otherwise tip. She turned the word realistic over in her mind. She thought about Owen's choice, about Amber delivering he was unhappy in the break room like it was a closing argument. She opened her laptop. She wasn't searching for proof of the affair. She was past that. She typed, "Catherine Moore, Family Law, Louisville, KY." She had referred 3 clients to Catherine Moore over the past 2 years. She knew the woman's reputation the way you know the reputation of someone you respect professionally. Not from gossip, but from watching how she built cases, how she worked, how she never walked into a room underprepared. She knew what a good attorney looked like when she was fully committed to winning. She looked at the number. She picked up the phone. Teresa Nguyen appeared in her doorway at 3:15 with a USB drive, and the energy of someone who had been arguing with herself about this for days, and had finally, just barely, landed on the right side of it. "I have something to tell you," Teresa said. "And I need you to know I almost didn't. But then I thought about what I'd want someone to do for me." She had hesitated, but she was here now. Amber had used Owen's login credentials twice to forward confidential client files to a personal email address. Not a client address, not a firm address, a private Gmail account. The IT department had flagged it. They hadn't formally reported it. Teresa had a copy. She was reading his emails, Lindsey said. Yes. She had his password. Teresa just looked at her. The look said, "You understand what this means. You understand exactly what this means." Here is what it meant. It meant Owen had given Amber access to his professional accounts. It meant the affair had extended into the operational infrastructure of their shared life. It meant that for over a year, while Lindsey worked 30 feet away, Amber had been moving through spaces that didn't belong to her, quietly with a key she'd been given, touching things she had no right to touch. Lindsey steadied herself. "Thank you," she said. "I'm sorry I waited," Teresa said. "You're here now." After Teresa left, Lindsey sat with the USB drive in her palm. She was a legal assistant. She had spent 6 years building cases from documents exactly like the ones on that drive. She had done it for strangers, had sat across from women in precisely this situation, and helped them construct the paperwork that would become their futures. She knew this work. She had always known this work. She picked up the phone and called Catherine Moore's office. Left a message. Steady voice, clear name, direct ask. That evening, at her mother's house where she'd been sleeping for 3 nights, she opened a spreadsheet. 4 years of household transactions. Owen's business launch timeline. The specific months when her salary had covered their fixed expenses while his client base built itself from nothing. She built the case the way she'd been trained to build cases. The handwriting in the notepad beside the laptop was clean and even, each line a little more settled than the last. Every night, it got a little steadier. Catherine Moore's office was on the 3rd floor of a building on 4th Street. Not the polished block, but the next one over where the rents were honest and the clients arrived looking like they'd rather not be recognized. Lindsey fed quarters into the parking meter and took the stairs because the elevator was too slow, and she needed to keep moving, or she'd turn around and drive home. Catherine came out at exactly 3 o'clock, mid-40s, low heels, a handshake with actual pressure behind it. No sympathetic head tilt, no soft voice, just eyes that had already started assessing. "Tell me everything," she said. "Don't edit." So Lindsey told her. Owen, the wrong phone, the 14 months, the break room and he was unhappy, the USB drive, the night she said choose and he chose by saying nothing. She told it the way she told everything professionally, clear, sequential, the legal assistance version, the one that leaves no room for interpretation. And when she finished, Catherine had 3 pages of notes. "Finances," Catherine said. "What's in your name?" His name. Joint. Lindsey listed it out. Joint checking. His 401k. The house. In Owen's name, she'd always assumed. Her car, technically titled under his business. The savings account he'd moved to his personal account in October for tax purposes, she'd been told. She'd signed off without pushing back because she trusted him and she was tired and she'd been 32 weeks pregnant and had larger things on her mind. Catherine looked up. His consulting firm. When did he incorporate? 4 years ago, right after we got married. What did your household finances look like that first year? I covered most of it. He was building his client base. I never thought of it as an investment, Catherine finished. I know. You were being a partner. She wrote something down. It was an investment. She looked at Lindsey. I want the deed, the incorporation documents, and the 2021 LLC restructuring. He restructured. Most small business owners do around year 2 or 3. Liability protection. They move fast before the end of the fiscal year. Their attorneys hand them documents they don't read all the way through. She held Lindsey's gaze. I'll know more by Friday. Catherine already had a read on this. She'd seen this exact shape before. A woman who worked in law. who understood the system, who had nevertheless been kept just outside the decisions that affected her most. She was already building the case before Lindsey stood up to leave. You could see it in the way she stacked her notes. Lindsey drove back on the I-64 in the dark, with the heat running high. Her phone buzzed twice on the passenger seat. Owen. She watched his name appear and disappear and kept her eyes on the road. At her mother's kitchen table she worked until midnight. Spreadsheet open. 4 years of household transactions mapped against Owen's startup timeline. The numbers telling a story she already knew, but needed on paper. She had spent 6 years building winning cases for other people. She knew exactly how this kind of document became someone's future. Now she was building her own. Carol set a cup of tea beside the laptop without a word and went to bed. Friday morning, Catherine called. "Come in Monday, I found something." Her voice had the particular quality of a woman who has read a document and understood precisely what it contains. Saturday, Lindsey went into the office. Catching up, she told herself, and found Owen's name in the firm's internal directory with a notation she hadn't expected. She stopped in the hallway. Not terminated, resigned. Effective Thursday. He had quit his job, which meant he had planned this. Which meant the night she said choose wasn't the beginning of anything. It was the announcement of a decision he'd already made weeks before she ever found that phone on the edge of the bathtub. She went to her office, opened Instagram. She hadn't looked in 2 weeks. His most recent post was 4 days old. A restaurant, candlelight, 2 glasses of wine. No caption, no faces. But she recognized the tablecloth immediately, the particular shade of it, the way the candle sat in the center, the Haymarket on Market Street. She and Owen had gone there for their 3rd anniversary. He left his 30-week pregnant wife and took his girlfriend to dinner 4 days later, to the restaurant where they used to celebrate, and he posted a photo. Some cruelties aren't dramatic, they're just precise. She closed the app, sat very still with her eyes on the wall across from her desk, the Henderson file open where she'd left it, the cursor blinking in the spreadsheet she'd been updating before she looked up his name. Then she picked up her phone and called Catherine. "He moved out," she said. "I think he's living with her." "How fast?" "Fast." A pause. "That changes the posture. He's not trying to save the marriage, he's trying to secure the exit." Another pause. "Which is exactly why it matters that you called me first." "What do I do?" "Nothing. Go to work. Be normal. Don't confront him. Don't threaten him." Catherine's voice was flat and certain, the voice of someone who has run this play before. Let him think he's already won. Men who think they've won stop being careful. Lindsey looked at the Henderson file on her desk. "I'll be there Monday," she said. She arrived 15 minutes early. Catherine placed a single sheet of paper on the table between them. "In 2021, she said, when Owen restructured the business, he needed to transfer 2 assets to a non-business partner to clean up the ownership structure. Standard procedure." She tapped the page. He transferred the house to joint ownership. She looked at Lindsey. "Your name is on the deed. It's been there since October 2021. 50%. Lindsey's name, in black ink. Patient and absolute, sitting there for 3 years without either of them knowing it was waiting. "He doesn't know," she said. "Almost certainly not." His attorney was moving fast, end-of-year filing. Owen signed what he was handed. Catherine crossed her arms. "He abandoned his pregnant wife and moved in with his girlfriend. He's about to send an attorney to remove her from a house she half owns." The radiator knocked once and went quiet. "What else?" Lindsey asked. Catherine almost smiled. Not fully, just the beginning of one. "The incorporation documents list you as a financial contributor in the founding paperwork. 4 years of health insurance coverage during the startup phase. That constitutes a legal claim against the business equity." She pulled out another sheet. "And the USB drive your colleague gave you. Policy violation, unauthorized access, terminable offense." She stacked the pages together with care. "I want to use all of it at once, in one room, with him sitting across the table." She looked at Lindsey. "When does he expect to win?" she asked. Lindsey thought about the Instagram post. the anniversary restaurant, the 2 glasses of wine. Any day now, she said. Good, said Catherine. She clicked her pen closed. Let him. Owen stopped calling after the 3rd day. She'd expected him to keep performing the repentant husband, to keep building his version of the story, keep leaving messages she didn't return. The silence was different. It had a shape to it, deliberate. She found out why on a Tuesday. A man in a gray overcoat knocked at 9 in the morning. She'd come back to the house to collect her work files. Her name was still on the lease. She still had every right to be there, but she'd been staying at her mother's to give Owen the space he'd taken without asking. The man had a folder. Ms. Hart? Her maiden name. She'd been using it professionally for 2 weeks, hadn't mentioned it to Owen. He'd had someone look into her. Yes. Stephen Albright, representing Owen Cole. He extended an envelope. Notice to vacate. Given the circumstances, a brief clinical glance at her stomach, the kind that takes inventory. My client is offering 60 days. She took the envelope. Because it's a legal document and you take it. She stood in the doorway of her own kitchen. 4 years of dinners made at that stove, the positive test at 6 in the morning on that counter, the nursery she'd painted herself in August, and she was holding an eviction notice while a stranger waited on her front step. Then she saw the car. Owen's car was at the curb. Not the driveway, the curb, at a calculated distance. He was in the driver's seat looking at his phone. In the passenger seat, Amber. She was wearing the dark green coat, the good wool one. Lindsey had complimented it once at the office, months ago, standing in the hallway after a Thursday lunch. It was a gift, Amber had said, touching the lapel. She understood now who had given it to her. He had brought her. He'd sent his attorney to deliver a vacate notice to his pregnant wife, and then sat at the curb with the other woman, engine running, waiting to see what would happen. That decision requires something specific, a particular way of seeing the person you married, a reclassification so complete that she becomes an obstacle rather than a woman. I've thought about that a lot, about what it takes to do that, about who you have to decide she is. Lindsey looked at the car for a long moment. Albright was still waiting. She turned to him. My attorney is Catherine Moore, she said. Her voice was completely even. You can reach her at her office on 4th Street. She's expecting to hear from you. Something moved quickly across Albright's face. Miss Hart, the 60-day offer is, have a good day, she said. She closed the door. She stood in the kitchen for 30 seconds, not moving, not thinking, just letting the moment finish. Her work files were already in her bag. She'd come specifically for them. She picked up the bag, collected the 3 prenatal vitamins sitting on the counter and slipped them in, grabbed the phone charger she'd forgotten last time. She went out the front door, past Albright, who had stepped back onto the porch, walked down the front path at a normal pace. She did not look at Owen's car. She got into her own car and started it. In the rearview mirror, the house, Albright on the step, Owen's car at the curb, Amber's face through the windshield, still and watchful, the dark green coat just visible through the glass. Lindsey pulled away from the curb. She called Catherine at the first red light. He served me, she said. I know. Albright called 10 minutes ago. Catherine's voice was unhurried, the voice of someone working 3 moves ahead. He ran the business asset argument against the house. He doesn't know. No, he doesn't. A pause. I've been thinking about how to handle the reveal. I don't want to do it through a letter exchange. I want him to see it in person. Lindsey drove. Louisville in January, gray sky, wet streets, a school bus heading the opposite direction, the ordinary world moving at its ordinary pace, completely indifferent to the fact that her life was being reconstructed from the ground up, the racetrack on the corner, the light turning green. I want to be in the room when you show him, Lindsey said. That, said Catherine, is exactly what I was going to ask. Her mother's guest room smelled like the lavender candle Carol had kept on the windowsill since Lindsey was 12. The walls still held the ghost outlines of old posters, pale rectangles where the paint had stayed protected, little archaeological traces of a version of her that had existed in this room before Owen, before any of this. She lay on her side in the narrow bed facing the wall, thinking about the deed with her name on it, and felt, for the first time in 3 weeks, something that wasn't panic or grief, something colder, more useful. She was up at 6, made coffee, opened the spreadsheet. There's a particular state that doesn't get talked about enough, the place where devastation and preparation exist at the same time, fully, without canceling each other out, where you can cry in the shower and then sit down and build a document that will matter in a courtroom. That was where Lindsey was living now. Both things, completely, simultaneously. Owen texted at 7:15. "I know you're upset, but you need to be realistic about the situation." She stared at the word realistic for a long moment. Then she screenshotted it, emailed it to Catherine, and went back to the spreadsheet. The audacity of that word. The man who had lied for 14 months, who had brought his girlfriend to watch his pregnant wife receive a vacate notice, who had sent an attorney to her door instead of coming himself, telling her to be realistic. That word landed on her like a lit match. It didn't break anything. It burned away the last of what she'd been uncertain about, and what was left underneath was clear and hard and entirely workable. Teresa showed up Wednesday evening with soup from the Vietnamese place on Bardstown and a USB drive. "What's on it?" Lindsey asked at the door. "Emails from the company server." Amber used Owen's login twice to forward documents to a private address. Teresa held it out. "IT flagged it. Never formally reported it. I've had a copy since November." Lindsey looked at the driveway for a moment. The porch light caught the rain on the pavement. "Why didn't you—" "Because I didn't know if it would matter," Teresa said. "Now it matters." They ate soup at Carol's kitchen table and talked about everything except Owen and Amber. Teresa's cats, the Henderson case, whether the new Thai place on Bardstown was worth the wait. Normal things. The kind of conversation that reminds you that you are a person, not just a situation. That the world is still running its ordinary course and eventually you will move through it again at ordinary speed. After Teresa left, Lindsey sat with the USB drive in her palm. Amber had used Owen's credentials to access company files. A policy violation, grounds for termination, and this was the part that Lindsey, as a legal assistant, understood with immediate and precise clarity, a form of leverage. She texted Catherine, "Have something else for the file. Call when you can." Catherine called at 8. "Add everything," she said, after Lindsey walked her through it. "All of it. The emails, the timeline, the policy documentation. We're not using it yet." A pause. "We're using everything at once." "When?" "And when I've finished mapping exactly what Owen actually owns, and what he's about to lose." Catherine's voice was steady and exact. "I want him in a room, Lindsey. I want to watch him read it." Lindsey was quiet for a moment. "How long?" 2 weeks. Maybe 3. "Okay. Go to work. Act normally. Don't tell him anything." A brief pause. "Let him keep planning." She looked at the wall of her mother's kitchen, the same calendar that had hung there for years, the one with lighthouse photographs, October's picture still showing because no one had thought to turn it. She reached over and flipped it to February. The weeks that followed had a strange suspended quality. She went to work, answered emails, passed Amber in the hallway twice and said nothing, not as a strategy, though it functioned as one, but because she had already said what needed to be said in that office, and what came next wouldn't happen in a hallway. Amber watched her. Lindsey could feel it, that measuring look, the one trying to calculate how much Lindsey knew and whether it was enough to be dangerous. Lindsey gave her nothing to calculate with. Owen sent 2 more messages. Both were phrased reasonably. Both were, underneath the reasonableness, about the house. She forwarded them to Catherine without replying. In the evenings, at her mother's kitchen table, she filled pages in the notepad, everything she knew, everything she could prove, in clean, ordered lines. Her handwriting grew steadier with each passing day, each entry a little more certain than the last. The whole document accumulating weight the way a well-built case does, quietly, methodically, until one morning you look at what you've made, and understand that it's enough. The meeting was at Catherine's office on the first Tuesday of March. Catherine had sent the invitation through Albright, framing it as a settlement discussion. Standard language, nothing in the wording to suggest what was waiting inside. Owen arrived 7 minutes late. Lindsey was already there, seated beside Catherine at the conference table, palms flat on the surface, the same way she'd steadied herself at her mother's kitchen table every night for 3 weeks. Owen came in with Albright and stopped for half a second when he saw her. He'd expected Catherine alone, maybe. He recovered quickly. He sat down across from her. He was in a good suit. He looked well rested. She noticed both things and set them aside. There's something specific about people who believe they've already won. They enter rooms differently, a particular ease in the shoulders, a willingness to be generous, to offer terms, to perform reasonableness because they can afford to. Watch for it. You'll recognize it. Owen had it. He was about to lose it. Albright opened with the settlement terms: 60-day notice, modest spousal support, a visitation arrangement to be established after the birth. He spoke with the practiced efficiency of an attorney who expected the meeting to be brief and largely uneventful. Catherine let him finish. Then she opened her folder. She didn't start with the deed. She started further back, walking the room through Lindsey's financial contributions to the household, across the 4 years Owen had spent building his business, laying it out with the unhurried calm of someone describing something that had always been true and simply hadn't been named yet. She showed how those contributions met the legal threshold for a founding equity claim in Owen's LLC. She presented the documentation to Albright, who looked at it with the expression of a man who had not been given the full picture by his client. Owen shifted in his chair. Then Catherine said, "I'd like to discuss the property." Albright said carefully, "Our position on the house as a business asset is incorrect," Catherine said. "The house is not a business asset." She reached into her folder, produced a single document, and placed it face up in the center of the table, oriented toward Owen. She said nothing. She let him look. Watch him read it. Watch his eyes move across the top of the page and stop, then start again. Watch him find the names in the ownership column, his name, and below it, Lindsey's name, and beside Lindsey's name, 50%. Watch him understand that he signed this. Watch him realize he has been threatening to evict his wife from a house she half owns. Owen looked at Lindsey. She held his gaze, said nothing. "This is..." He picked up the document. "Read it again." "This can't be right. There must be..." "That's the original 2021 document," Catherine said. "Notarized. Witnessed. I have the complete chain of title documentation. Your attorney at the time was moving quickly before the end of the fiscal year. You signed what you were handed." She looked at him steadily. "That is not Lindsey's problem." Owen turned to Albright. "Did you know about this?" Albright had the expression of a man who had just discovered something he should have known weeks ago. "I need to review..." "There's nothing to review," Catherine said. "The document is what it is." She opened the folder again. Second document. "This is the founding contribution record from your LLC incorporation. It reflects Lindsey's financial support during your company's first year of operation. Under Kentucky law, that contribution constitutes a partial equity claim against the business." She placed it on top of the first. "We are prepared to file on both." Third document. "This is a summary of email server activity at your firm, specifically unauthorized access by an employee who used your credentials to forward confidential documents to a personal address." She looked at him without blinking. "We haven't filed a bar complaint yet. That's a conversation for another day." The room was very quiet. Owen set the document down. His hand trembled slightly. Not dramatically, just enough, the kind of tremor that lives in the fingers when the body understands something, before the mind has finished processing it. She had spent 4 years learning the way his hands moved. She recognized it. This is what losing everything actually looks like. Not a shout, not a collapse. A man sitting very still at a conference table, looking at documents he signed without reading, understanding in real time the full architecture of what he'd built, and exactly what it was going to cost him. He had come into this room with every advantage. He had come to offer terms. The advantage was never his. "This is," Owen started, stopped. "You planned this," Catherine answered before Lindsey could. "My client gathered existing documents and hired an attorney to review them. That isn't a plan. It's due diligence." She folded her hands. "Here is what I'm offering, and I'm offering it once. The house goes to Lindsey outright, not 50-50, full ownership, in exchange for releasing the equity claim. Child support at a figure that reflects the actual cost of raising a child in Louisville. Medical expenses, education, all of it covered, and the email situation stays where it is for now." She looked at him. "Or we file everything Friday." Owen looked at Lindsey, not calculating, not managing, just looking at her, the way he used to before any of this. And for a moment she saw something in his face that might have been the person she'd married 4 years ago, before 14 months of a different life running parallel to theirs. It didn't change anything. "Take the deal, Owen," she said quietly. Not with anger, just with the steady, unadorned honesty of someone who has already decided everything she needed to decide. Albright placed a hand on Owen's arm. They exchanged a look. Owen looked at the documents. All 3, stacked neatly in the center of the table, exactly where Catherine had placed them. Everything he'd tried to take, returned and reordered and waiting. He picked up the pen. The settlement was finalized in 10 days. Owen signed without a meeting. Documents routed through attorneys. No more shared rooms. The house transferred directly into Lindsey's name. The child support terms were exactly what Catherine had specified. He didn't contest a single word. But Amber was still at Callaway and Reed, still at her desk at the end of the hall, still in the break room at noon, still passing Lindsey's office doorway with that careful measuring look, trying to reconstruct what had happened in that conference room, trying to calculate what Lindsey knew and how much of it was already in motion. Lindsey went to HR on a Thursday morning. She didn't go in angry. That matters. Anger makes people look disorganized, and disorganized people get dismissed. She went in precise, documented, and completely prepared. She was a legal assistant. She had spent 6 years watching people present their cases in rooms exactly like that one. She knew the difference between an argument and a record. Patricia from HR was in her early 50s, the kind of woman who had spent 30 years in employment law and was genuinely impossible to shock. She had the particular stillness of someone who had heard everything and learned to evaluate rather than react. She looked at the USB drive, looked at the emails, looked at the policy documentation, which Lindsey had helped draft in 2022 and knew by memory. "Is there a personal dimension to this?" Patricia asked carefully. "Yes," Lindsey said. "I've done my best to keep that separate from what I'm presenting. The policy violation is in the documents. It stands on its own, independent of any personal matter between me and the employee." Patricia looked at the emails again for a long time. "I appreciate your attention to detail," she said. The hallway conversation that Friday afternoon wasn't what anyone would call a confrontation. It was quieter than that, and worse. Lindsey was at the slow copier near the kitchen when Amber came around the corner. They hadn't spoken in 3 weeks, not since the closed-door office conversation, the one where Lindsey had said 14 months and watched Amber's face absorb it. Amber stopped when she saw her, that appraising look again, scanning the surface, trying to read what was underneath. "Hey," Amber said. "Hey." Lindsey pulled her copies from the tray, tapped them straight against the edge of the machine. "I heard the settlement went through," Amber said, careful, testing. "I'm glad you're—" "Patricia in HR has the emails." Lindsey said it the way she'd say anything factual. No performance, no build-up, just information delivered cleanly. "The ones you sent from Owen's account, both of them, with the timestamps and the receiving address." She looked directly at Amber. "You signed the data policy when you were hired. So did I." Something shifted in Amber's expression. The performance didn't collapse, not entirely, but the control broke at the edges. The composure she'd maintained through 14 months of careful, practiced behavior suddenly showing its seams. It was the first genuinely unguarded look Lindsey had seen on her face since any of this began. "Lindsey, you brought me ginger chews." Lindsey said it the same way she'd said everything else. Level, unhurried, the tone of someone recounting facts rather than delivering a verdict. "You sat with me when I was sick at 8 weeks. You wrote me a card." She picked up her papers. "You did all of that while you were sleeping with my husband for 14 months while I was pregnant?" She held Amber's eyes for one long, steady moment. "I hope it was worth it." She walked back to her office. Here's what people want from a moment like that. The tears, the raised voices, the full accounting delivered at volume. And it's understandable. But what actually undoes someone like Amber isn't the shouting. Shouting she can manage. She has spent her entire adult life performing in dramatic scenes, and drama gives her something to push against. What destroys her is being seen, clearly, completely without ceremony, being reduced to exactly what she is, and watching the person she hurt walk away without needing anything from her in return. That's what she can't recover from. The following Monday, Amber's office was dark. By Wednesday, the desk was being cleared. Teresa texted at 11:17, "She's out, effective immediately." Lindsey read the message at her desk, set the phone face down on the surface, looked out the window at the parking garage across the street, the flat gray of Louisville in late February, the sky the color of unfinished business. She opened the Henderson file and went back to work. Owen, she learned through other people, had lost his 2 largest clients in the weeks following the settlement. The specific details of the restructuring had moved through Louisville's business community, the way those things do, quietly and completely, and the version of himself he'd been building for 4 years had a different shape now. He was consulting, taking smaller contracts, subletting an office in a commercial building near Nulu. The firm that had once been his operated under a different name. She heard he'd tried to call Amber twice after the settlement. Both times, she hadn't answered. Lindsey registered that information and waited for something to arrive alongside it. Satisfaction, maybe, or the particular closure people talk about. What came instead was something brief and shapeless, and then it was gone, replaced by the Henderson file and the question of where a comma belonged, and the steady, ordinary work of a Tuesday afternoon. She went into labor on a Wednesday night, 38 weeks along, doing something completely unremarkable, eating crackers at her mother's kitchen table, watching something on television she wouldn't later be able to name. The kind of ordinary evening that has no idea what it's about to become. Contractions at 11:20. She timed them on her phone with the same methodical attention she brought to almost everything. Every 15 minutes, she set down the crackers. Every 8 minutes, she knocked on her mother's door. Carol appeared in 12 seconds, already dressed. She'd been sleeping in her clothes for 2 weeks, not making an announcement of it, not turning it into a moment, just quietly, completely ready. That kind of love doesn't make speeches. It just shows up before you need it. "All right," Carol said. "Bags in the car." She texted Owen from the back seat. 3 words. Labor started. Riverside. Not an invitation. Not a request. Just the truth stated plainly. Because she had decided somewhere in the past 8 weeks that she would continue being the kind of person who told the truth even when she didn't have to. He responded 7 minutes later. "I'm coming." She put the phone in her bag and didn't look at it again. The drive to Riverside took 20 minutes at midnight. Louisville was quiet and wet, the streets catching the streetlight in long broken reflections. The speedway on the corner blazing its indifferent fluorescence. A red light that lasted too long. Labor lasted 11 hours. Carol stayed beside her for all of it. No speeches, no reassurances, nothing performed. She held Lindsey's hand through the contractions, refilled the water cup, asked the nurses the questions Lindsey stopped being able to form words for. The irreplaceable, unglamorous work of someone who had simply decided that the present moment was the only thing that mattered. Owen arrived at 6 in the morning. The charge nurse came in with a careful expression. "Mr. Cole is in the waiting room." "He can wait," Lindsey said, between contractions, without looking up. He waited. At 9:51, the baby arrived. A girl, £7, 4 ounces. A sound that filled the room, indignant and complete. The sound of someone who had arrived entirely on her own terms and already had opinions about it. They placed her on Lindsey's chest. Whatever else this story is, and it is many things, it is also this. A woman who received an eviction notice at her own front door, who sat across a conference table and watched a man read the documents that undid him, who built her own case by hand at 34 weeks pregnant, lying in a hospital bed in Louisville at 10 in the morning with a 7-pound girl on her chest. This. Before anything else, this first. Carol made a sound from the corner that she immediately tried to stop and couldn't. Lindsey looked at her daughter for a long time without speaking. The crease in her cheek, the dark, unexpected volume of her hair, the strange and inexplicable weight of a person who had not existed until that morning, and now simply, completely did. She pressed her lips to the baby's forehead. "Hey," she said. Just the two of them. The room quiet around them. "I've been waiting for you." An hour later, she let Owen in. He stood in the doorway, pale, rumpled, the dismantled version of himself she'd never seen at that hour, all the careful presentation stripped away. He crossed to the bed. He looked at the baby. His face did something. Not remorse performed for the room, not calculation. Something genuine, unguarded. The face of a man arriving very late, at the edge of something he would carry for a long time. "Her name is June," Lindsey said. He looked up. "June," he said quietly, the word careful in his mouth, like a man testing whether he'd earned the right to say it. "The agreement is finalized," she said. "Catherine handles everything from here." He nodded. He reached out and touched June's hand, one finger, careful, the touch of someone who understood he wasn't owed more than that. June's fingers curled around his, indiscriminate and new, with no awareness of the history attached to that hand. He pulled back. "I'll do better," he said. His voice was low. "At being, I'll be better." Lindsey looked out the window. Morning in Louisville. Pale sky, cold, nothing extraordinary about any of it. "She'll tell you what she needs," Lindsey said, "when she's old enough to decide." He stood there one more moment. He left. The door pulled shut behind him. Carol exhaled from the corner, long and slow, the breath of someone who'd been holding it for hours. June made a small sound and settled against Lindsey's chest. The monitors kept their steady count. "We're okay," Lindsey told the nurse when she knocked. She meant it. 1 year later, the house on Breckenridge Lane had a front porch that faced west. In the late afternoon, the light off the river had a quality that was distinctly Louisville, gold and gray at the same time, the kind of light that doesn't exist anywhere else quite like that. And Lindsey had developed the habit of sitting on that porch between 5 and 6 with coffee and June in the bouncer, not doing anything in particular. June was 11 months old. Red hair, the exact same red as Lindsey's, a genetic fact that felt, in quiet moments, like a small and private joke the universe had decided to tell. The concentrated expression of someone with strong opinions, and not yet enough words for them. Working on walking with the determination of a person who had decided that staying on the floor was simply not an option. January again. The cold, wet kind. Louisville never quite keeps its promises about winter. Owen was still in the city. An apartment near New Lou, smaller contracts, a company with a different name on the letterhead. The custody arrangement had been mediated, civil, resolved mostly by email. She didn't track the details. She had enough on her plate. Amber had moved to Nashville. Teresa mentioned it once in passing, in the way people mention things when they've decided you no longer need to be protected from them. Lindsey didn't think about Amber much. There was a specific freedom in that, in the absence of performance, in not having to hold yourself carefully around someone who had been building something against you. She hadn't known how much energy that had been costing her until she stopped spending it. Catherine had sent a card in December, handwritten, rooting for both of you. It was on the refrigerator. Teresa came for dinner on alternating Sundays, always with soup from the Bardstown place. June had strong opinions about Teresa. expressed primarily through pulling her hair, which Teresa maintained was a sign of excellent taste. Lindsey was still at Callaway and Reed, still a legal assistant. She'd started the certification courses for her full license. Evenings, after June went down, laptop open at the kitchen table, doing the work she had always known how to do, now working toward doing it under her own name. Here's what a year on the other side actually looks like. Not triumphant, not cinematic, not the version with the swelling score. Just a porch in January, coffee going cold, a baby learning to walk. The gold and gray light. The house has her name on it, fully, plainly, on documents signed in a conference room on 4th Street while Owen read the papers Catherine had spent 3 weeks building. She built the case. Catherine presented it. Owen lost everything he thought was his. The house, the equity, the narrative he'd constructed where he was the reasonable one, the one offering generous terms. He lost his footing in a room. She was there to watch. June looked up from the bouncer and found Lindsey's face. Not searching, finding. The way her eyes simply went there, the way they always did, as if that was just where they were supposed to land. Lindsey set her coffee cup on the porch rail, rested her hand on June's knee, warm through the wool. The light shifted. The cold settled around them. A car moved down Breckenridge. Someone on the street below was burning wood, the smoke thin and faintly sweet, rising into the gray air, the smell of something ordinary and good. Normal things, unremarkable things, hers. June grabbed Lindsey's finger. Both hands, the full grip of someone who had found exactly what she wanted and had absolutely no intention of letting go. Lindsey sat there and let herself be held. The river wound between the rooftops, indifferent and constant, the way it always had. She didn't need a perfect ending. She had this one. And this one was enough. The end.